Okay, welcome. We're going to get started on our next program. We have with us Keith Hambrecht from Utah Division of Forestry, Fire, Estates, Lands, and he's here to talk to us about an overview of the state lands restoration program.
Thank you. I'm going to give you guys an overview of our restoration program. This is an exciting talk for me to give because this restoration program is brand new, but it's been in the works for many years. So a lot of the work that we're doing as part of this restoration program, we've been doing for many years, but we didn't formally designate this work as the restoration program until the past year. And then we've also done a lot of hiring and capacity building as part of that. So I'm the restoration program manager for forestry, fire, and state lands. And today, what I'm hoping to do is define sovereign lands, which is the state lands that we manage, and then describe what that management looks like, and specifically talk a lot about vegetation, which is what we do a lot of management of. And then I want to highlight our current work, the progress that we're making, the challenges that we're facing, as well as where we're headed into the future, and really hoping to promote future collaboration because a lot of our work is really driven by that collaboration. So just starting here, Forestry, Fire, and State Lands is a division within the Department of Natural Resources. The department has now 9 divisions and 2 offices. And we manage 3 separate things: forestry, fire, and state lands. The majority of the land that we manage are state sovereign lands. And state sovereign lands are essentially the beds of the navigable waterways of the state. And so it's the large rivers and lakes that were deemed navigable at statehood. So when Utah became a state, were they navigable? And those lands, let's see, here we go. So those lands are essentially below the ordinary high water mark of these water bodies. So we have Bear Lake, Bear River, Great Salt Lake, Jordan River, Utah Lake, and then the sections of the Green and Colorado River that are not federally managed. We also have some small properties that got lumped in with our state lands management. But the majority is these sovereign lands, which is 1.5 million acres of lake and riverbed. But more importantly, I think 2,200 miles of shoreline. So it's all the major wetlands and riparian areas of the state. And that's really the area where we're doing much of our management, since a lot of that land is underwater. There is revenue from this land through mineral leasing mainly, but permits, leasing, and royalties do produce funding for the state. And so how do we manage this land? We're supposed to, with our management, factor in public health, public interest, public safety, and public welfare. Essentially, these lands are about as public land gets. They're lands for the state of Utah, for the public of Utah. And if there's any proposed use on that land, we have to weigh it against these public trust values of navigation, fish and wildlife habitat, aquatic beauty, public recreation, and water quality. And so what that looks like as far as how we actually do that work, we do a lot of permitting, leasing, and enforcement of those permits and leases and of the state code. We also support a lot of recreation. We have funding for recreation and working to enhance recreation. But really, because of the nature of this land, where we're just dealing with that narrow boundary along the shoreline of all these water bodies, we really need to partner across boundaries to get this work done. It's really, really important. And then if you think about it, although we're the land manager, we don't manage water. Most water management happens in other divisions or other entities. The Division of Wildlife Resources is managing the animals of the state. We can certainly partner with them, but really the place that leads us to is the most active management we can do to improve this land is really managing vegetation. And we can have a huge impact by focusing on vegetation with that work. And so our restoration program really focuses on vegetation management and how we can improve vegetation on the land. And then if it's outside of vegetation, generally we're looking to partner with other entities. We have a lot of challenges and constraints on this land. So probably the biggest one is hydrology. We are at the bottom of the watershed with all these large water bodies. We don't manage the water, and we have really altered hydrology in this system. I mean, we're at the bottom of the watershed where we have diversion structures. All the water is managed in the name of water delivery, not necessarily for the health of these rivers or for vegetation. And we have that really narrow specific boundary. So if we're managing just ordinary high water mark and below, there's only so much work we can get done within that small boundary. And then also, we have a lot of invasive species issues, specifically invasive vegetation. Our biggest concerns are Russian olive, tamarisk, and Phragmites. They're incredibly prevalent and also have a really large impact on water and hydrology as well. And so that leads to the question of what is restoration and what are we restoring? And so I think we recognize that we're incredibly constrained by hydrology and all this water management and being at the bottom of the watershed. So we're not going to restore the Jordan River to what it once was. But that doesn't mean we can't still improve it and there's not restoration to happen. And so what we're really looking to do is we're looking to restore native plant communities. We're looking to restore habitat and really restore value to this land. And so we're hoping that not only if we restore value to the land, then in turn we'll increase appreciation for this land as this really important public land in the state. So we also have a lot of opportunities on this land. So I already mentioned collaboration, but because we have this ordinary high watermark boundary, we're everybody's neighbor on all these water bodies, and we're in a position to really act as the glue to push efforts forward to improve. And of the work that we've done thus far on a lot of these water bodies, we found we're really well poised in our division to play a key role in improving the land. And then it's also important to note that we have a good funding source. So in the beginning I mentioned we generate $5 to $11 million of funding for the state. And a bill was passed recently that now says that that funding must be prioritized for reinvestment into sovereign lands. So that is really how our restoration program is born, is now we're able to ask for funding to say, hey, this land needs some care. We want to reinvest this money back into the land. And so we have a lot of important land and we have this funding and we can make a really, really big impact, especially if we do a lot of collaboration. And so what we found of the work that we've done thus far is this is really our recipe for success. And it maybe seems kind of obvious. You need funding and you need people. But that wasn't necessarily the case when we started, where our division wasn't really recognized as the key player that it really is and should be. And so we were asked to solve problems and we didn't have people or money to do it. And now we're in a position to say, hey, if you want, we can absolutely do that, but we need a coordinator to do it. We need ongoing funding. These are long-term issues. And then once we have that coordinator and funding in place, we're really in a position to build partnerships. And then the final piece that we found is really important is this research collaboration. So we've really made an effort to focus on local research that really helps us answer unanswered questions that we have on what's the best path forward. And so we've been able to build a team kind of based off of this recipe of success. And so just going back to vegetation quickly, I think this is important to note. I think there's a lot of criticism of large-scale invasive vegetation projects and efforts. And I think that a lot of that criticism is valid. However, it doesn't mean we shouldn't do them. And often the reason why these large efforts are not successful is there's not enough funding to carry it out in the long term. There's not like long-term stewardship of these areas. And really, we're in a position to do all that, where we can get ongoing funding, we can follow through with our efforts, and we can really focus on long-term management. We always try to do as much integrated weed management as possible on this land. And so we're looking at every tool in the toolbox we can possibly use for a particular issue. We really focus on responsible use of herbicides. And herbicides are a really important tool that we have to use to address a lot of these invasive species issues. But we want to take it a step further, and our program is now shifting away from just weed control for the sake of controlling these weeds and looking at restoration. What are our long-term goals? We want to revegetate. And then from that perspective, we go kind of back to these public trust values. We're looking at wildlife habitat, water quality, just aesthetic and recreational value. And so we're hoping we can be good stewards of the land in the long term. And so our team that we now have to do this work, I have stepped into the program manager role as of the last year, and I'm really still making the transition into that, kind of transitioning out of being the person coordinating and doing all the work to trying to figure out how to put together a team so we can get a lot more done. And then just running north to south in the Bear River area, we have a restoration coordinator that covers Bear Lake and Bear River, Ray Robinson. For Great Salt Lake, because it's so large, we now have 2 coordinators, Talon Robinson and Arlo Wing, and they are joint positions with the Division of Wildlife Resources. So we found in certain scenarios, it really makes sense for us to do joint positions with the most key partner for that water body to really help facilitate this collaboration. And so those 2 coordinators sit with the Division of Wildlife Resources. On the Jordan River, we have Jens Amon is our restoration coordinator, and he sits with the Jordan River Commission. And then I'm excited to announce on Utah Lake, we now have a Utah Lake restoration coordinator position that is open. So if you're looking for a really cool job, it's open now, closes on November 30th. And that position is going to sit with the Utah Lake Authority, our biggest partner for work on Utah Lake. We also have a new position open, also closing on November 30th for a field coordinator. And we're really hoping that this person's going to be our kind of flexible, adaptable coordinator that's roving around the state, dealing with the more immediate issues that come up, helping us with our small property management, all kinds of different tasks. So that will also be a very cool job. And then in the southeast area, we have a restoration coordinator, Joey Thomason. He covers the Green and Colorado rivers. So now, who is that? 12 minutes or, okay, we're good. We're good, all right. Now I'd like to go through some of the current work that we're doing. So this isn't everything that we're doing, but this is our major efforts that we're currently working on. And I'm gonna kind of just run north to south, going through some example work. And then on all these slides in my red box here, I have my little notes on recipe for success. And I would just say those notes aren't complete. We definitely have additional partners and additional funding, but I've just kind of named the major things. So starting up at Bear Lake, Eurasian water milfoil is a submerged aquatic weed that was discovered in 2019. It has huge negative impacts if it gets out of control. We're talking completely choking out all the marinas, really impeding recreation, and then having a huge impact on the ecosystem as well. And so we've started an effort to control that once it was discovered. This project, unfortunately, is, rather than us being proactive, we're reacting to this terrible situation. But we were able to jump on it early, and we're starting to figure out how to handle this problem. And our coordinator, Ray, is now working with Morella Ortiz, USU weed science professor that's helping us figure out how to best treat Eurasian water milfoil. And then I think what's nice about problems like these that pop up is really, it's just forcing our division to take a more active role in management of the lake. And then in turn, we learn more about the lake. And I think a lot of good can come from it. And so, yeah, we've got our coordinator. We have both ongoing and one-time funding for this effort. One of our major partners is Idaho, of course, because Bear Lake is half in Idaho. We have great research support now with the USU Weed Science Department, trying to figure out our best practices. And then for next steps or the future of this, I think really that is our biggest thing, is we're still trying to figure out what are the best practices to manage Eurasian water milfoil so it doesn't become a huge problem at Bear Lake. Next is our Lower Bear River Restoration Project. This one's really exciting. This project was really born from a couple of things. One, the Bear River being the largest tributary to Great Salt Lake. In the Great Salt Lake watershed, there's just so much interest to do as much as we can for Great Salt Lake. And if you look at the Bear River, I think there's a lot of room for improvement. And there's also a lot of concerns over erosion. And I think when those concerns over erosion came up, my fear was it was going to lead to us reactively armoring banks on the river and potentially creating additional problems. And so we got this one-time funding of $5 million and partnered with Ducks Unlimited to take a look at this whole lower stretch of the Bear River. It's from the dam, the Cutler Dam, all the way down to the Bear River Migratory Bird Refuge. So it's that whole 65-mile reach. It's a big area. And what this project's going to do is have 3 phases. One is an assessment phase where we really try to learn as much about the river and what the current conditions are. Phase 2 is an action plan. What are the things that we should be doing to improve the river? And if we want to actively address erosion, what's the best way to do that? And then our final phase will actually be implementing some pilot projects based on what we learned. And then really we see this as kind of just the seed project that gets us started on a lot more active work on the Bear River. So once we have that plan in place, we can ask for additional funding to do a lot more work. So for Great Salt Lake, our biggest effort is invasive Phragmites and wetland restoration. This is really the thing that got the restoration program started. This has been happening since 2014. And this is like the weed control problem that got kind of really forced our division to get much more active in land management. And our goals for this work is to remove invasive Phragmites, but not just that, take it much further, which is we're really looking at restoring migratory bird habitat, which has been hugely impacted by invasive Phragmites. We want to restore these wetlands and the native plant communities within them. And then a huge driver for this is water availability for Great Salt Lake. There's some pretty good evidence that Phragmites is consuming a lot more water than native plants would be if they were there instead. And there's also a recreation component. But this effort is huge. So our project area is shown on the map in red here. It's around 200,000 acres of wetlands. This project area includes the Bear River Migratory Bird Refuge. We partner with the Fish and Wildlife Service. It includes all of the state-managed waterfowl management areas. So we partner with Division of Wildlife Resources for that. And so we now have coordinators for this. We've had one-time and ongoing funding for a while, and that's really ramping up. We have a ton of partners. And then also really this effort got us started with our research collaboration. So we have an incredible partner in Karin Kettenring's Wetland Ecology and Restoration Lab. And their lab has helped us produce lots of best practices and really be a driver in what's the best way to handle invasive Phragmites, and then also to do this plant restoration. And we've made a ton of progress. These pictures show some areas around the lake. So the top this is what a Phragmites invaded wetland looks like. And then here's some areas where we've made tremendous progress, seeing native plants return and seeing birds return to these areas. So we've now really increased our efforts on the Jordan River. Jens has done a great job coordinating with a bunch of partners up and down the Jordan River. We We started a big effort with Phragmites. We've got 12 pilot projects that cover about 140 acres of Phragmites that we're working on. The Jordan River work is really partner dependent. Since we do have that high watermark boundary, we really need to go and work in the entire riparian area if we're going to be successful. So we've had to develop a lot of partnerships, and that's taking time because there's sometimes our adjacent landowner, our partner is a city, and they don't have any staff to do restoration type work. So we're really hoping that we can act as kind of the impetus for a big effort up and down the river to really improve it. And here's the list of all the stuff that we're doing. We have a lot going on, and Jensen's done a great job with all this, getting it off the ground. We've got both ongoing and one-time funding. The Jordan River Commission is our big partner here, as well as the many other partners up and down the river. I think on my next slide, I actually have a map of it. But I would like to say I think this is an area where we could use some research support. I think it's pretty challenging to think about what's the best path forward for the Jordan River. We've got technical challenges, and then also just in the bigger picture, what's a good path forward for the Jordan River. So because the Jordan River is our local river, we've got 2 slides for the Jordan River, but here's all the sites up and down the Jordan River. And then every one of these sites has a partner. And these photos just kind of illustrate how challenging the work is. We've got Conservation Corps crews down in the river, and it's loaded with Phragmites, Russian olive, and tamarisk, and really hard to get to. So this is pretty challenging work. So then moving to Utah Lake, invasive Phragmites on Utah Lake, pretty similar to Great Salt Lake. It's been happening for a long time. We have similar goals, but because of the scale of Utah Lake, it's about 12,000 acres, so it's like 1/20th the size of our effort on Great Salt Lake. We've actually been able to significantly reduce Phragmites to 88% reduction, so we have about 12% Phragmites left out there around the lake. So that's super exciting, and it's kind of like we've been working on a similar timeline on Great Salt Lake, so it gives me hope for Great Salt Lake, where it's a much larger area with a lot more Phragmites, but this is coming for Great Salt Lake that we will see this reduction. It's really cool to see the lake now. So this top photo is from, I think, about 2010 or 2012, and you wouldn't even know the lake's there. There's a lot of places around the lake where that's the case. If you're driving on I-15 and you go past Provo Bay, you used to not know the lake was there, and now you can look out and see the wetlands, and this is what it looks like now. Got open water and plant diversity and a lot more bird use. It was super exciting. So we have our new Utah Lake Restoration Coordinator that's going to help carry this forward. Please apply. And we have ongoing and one-time funding. Our big partner here is Utah Lake Authority, and then also Utah County Weed Control has been an amazing partner, and they're actually doing a lot of the on-the-ground work for us there. And then the research out of the Wetland Ecology and Restoration Lab at USU, they have really helped us with Utah Lake now too, and kind of shifted some of their focus. So they're helping us figure out revegetation on Utah Lake. Jacobs Engineering also helped us with a Utah Lake study to look at restoration solutions. And then Division of Water Quality has their big water quality study that I think will help inform some of our efforts there. So we've got a lot of information to work with for improving Utah Lake. And I think for us, the future and next steps is really going to focus on revegetation. Now that we've done all this removal, we've started an effort to do a whole bunch of revegetation, and the Utah Lake Authority has been putting tons of plants in the ground, and we did a big seeding project. So we really want to ramp up our revegetation. And then more specifically, a huge area of concern is revegetation of submerged aquatic vegetation to really help with binding the sediment in the lake, providing habitat, and cleaning the water. So it's a really big concern over water quality and overall health of the lake. And doing submerged aquatic revegetation is incredibly challenging. So that's going to be really hard to figure out. I'm running out of time here. So on the Green and Colorado River, we have similar efforts. We're working on Russian olive and tamarisk. We use LiDAR to pick sites to increase side channel habitat. And this is pretty low hanging fruit stuff where we can identify areas that doing a little bit of removal of old decadent tamarisk stands will open up these side channels. And in higher water events, we're getting side channels and backwaters reactivated and increasing spawning and rearing habitat for fish, and then also an opportunity to get a lot more native plants out there. Joey Thomason's courting that. We work with the BLM. We have funding for that. I think this is also an area where we could use some research support. I mean, a lot is known about the Colorado River, but we could use some really specific help on how we scale up this effort. And that's really our next step, is scaling up on it. So I really just want to say there's loads of opportunity to partner with us. So if you're an adjacent landowner, you have a specific partner or a specific project that you'd like to get off the ground that we might be able to help with. We do have a lot of grant funding, and then our funding often is great match since it's state funding for federal grants. If you are a researcher and you might be able to help us with some of our work, please reach out, and there's probably loads of other opportunities as well. And that's what I got. I think we got 4 minutes for questions. I would love some questions. All right.
So this is probably really naive of me to ask the question, but I'll do it anyway. Because the area of that the frag covers around the Great Salt Lake is so big, is the go-to solution herbicide always? Are you looking at cattle still? Or are you using I know at one point in time you did,
Yep.
or goats, and I'm wondering, because the smaller areas of Salt Lake County, and that's who I work for, if that could be more effective for us in some areas. But I get nervous when we just use so much herbicide and pesticide in the environment.
That's a great question. So for Phragmites in particular, unfortunately, it's a perennial grass, and it has a really, really extensive root system. And so we do a lot of grazing. We use it as a tool. It's quite helpful. We use it in areas where it's too dry to effectively do all of our other treatments. So we can contain Phragmites with it. And the cattle, when they eat the Phragmites, they'll eat it and prevent it from producing seed, so we can contain it. But you can put as many cattle as you have onto Phragmites, and you can graze it nonstop, super intensively for 10 years. You take those cattle off, Phragmites is 5 or 6 feet tall within a month. And so it's the same with burning. And so I talked about integrated pest management. We have to use all of the tools in the toolbox. So we really have to use herbicide if we're going to kill Phragmites. If we're going to make any progress, we have to. But we're not over relying on it, right? We're saying we're going to use these best practices, which require mowing, water management, using grazing when it's appropriate, and then really in the long term, like the responsible use of herbicide will be, how do we maintain what we've gained so we're not relying on spraying herbicide forever? And we've got some really encouraging news on that, which is the seed bank for Phragmites only lasts about 3 to 5 years. And so what we found on Utah Lake is we're continuing to make progress, and we're hardly spraying any herbicide now. And then if we revegetate these areas and claim that ground, then I think we're really going to be able to shift away from needing herbicides. Yeah.
Hi, Keith. I wanted to know if you could share the source on the Phragmites water utilization. And then the second part of my question you kind of addressed in this one. It seems, in my experience, that last 10 to 15% of the Phragmites is going to be the most difficult to eradicate. I just want to see if you could provide some insights on the scalability for on-the-ground work to do more of that surgical precision that'll probably be required.
Yeah. So we had, as far as Phragmites water consumption, we had a small study done through the Division of Water Quality many years ago. And they did kind of a theoretical estimate of how much water Phragmites uses, and then we asked for a follow-up on that, on how does that compare to native plants. So if you're interested, I can share those studies with you. I would say they're pretty cursory. And so because they're kind of just theoretical estimates on how much water Phragmites might use, from that we were able to say, okay, if we got rid of all the Phragmites, converted it to saltgrass, inland saltgrass as an example, we think we could save about 40,000 acre feet per year for Great Salt Lake. So it's significant. But we wanted to know more, so we actually have the Utah Geological Survey doing a actual empirical analysis. So we're trying to measure evapotranspiration from a site. We have a tower set up to measure it, and we've measured it for 2 seasons. And then we're going to remove the Phragmites, keep monitoring it, and do our whole restoration process and see how much we've gained. So I think we'll learn a lot from that study, but it's going to take 5 years for us to know. Yeah. And then as far as your second question goes, yeah, the remaining 5 to 10% is going to be really challenging because that's in the hard to reach places, or it's in the dry places where we know our herbicide is not as effective. But we have had success in hand brush cutting and getting armies of Conservation Corps crews out. So we're going to be hiring lots of Conservation Corps crews out. So they're going to have really strong backs and be out there just mowing Phragmites all day long. And then the final thing I'll say is we're really working on remote sensing as well, so we can accurately map what's left. And I think that'll be, we're going to have that for Great Salt Lake because we have so many acres to cover.